A lot of people coming up with it. Chronic fatigue syndrome. It has similar symptoms to mild stages of polio. And what are we finding in the first part of their small intestine? Live oral stable vaccine virus. What are we finding in, the old mad cow disease? It's running rampant all over the world, not just in Great Britain. We're finding in Alzheimer's patients, and we're finding in brains that have been mentally altered, meaning mentally retarded individuals, the Jakob Creutzfeldt organism, which is a slow virus. And none of those are supposed to be there, folks. And that's very similar to having mad cow disease in a human being. What do these organisms look like? What looked like when I was in medical school, a bacteria looking like this, now looks like the organism on the right side, which is like a 3-stage rocket with a propeller on the front. They have mutated that much, and that's exactly what they look like now. What are you going to use to get rid of those organisms? We're using antibiotics. They're so strong, they're actually chemotherapy. And they're not working. We're using the bioavailable waters. And these organisms are leaving the system using the bioavailable waters. Now remember I talked about that ORP being at minus 200 and things happen from there on? Well, we find that if we begin at least as minus 200, that these waters are so selective that they will not touch an organism if it doesn't produce a toxin. So what's the significance of that? If I have strep in my mouth to help make me make saliva so that I can break down foods that come through, I don't want to mess with those. I don't want to mess with the lactobacillus in my digestive tract that's there if I'm going to eat dairy. I want them to still be alive. So they're good bacteria, shall we take it? And they're not so good bacteria. But once any of those organisms begin to produce a toxin, they wipe them out immediately. That's some selection there, that I can distinguish between that. We find that actually in the acid water made from the superacid water made from the electrolysis machine, that I can sterilize on contact, not even 30 seconds later, immediately, any untoward bacteria, virus, or fungus. Just water with no toxic side effects. In Japan, they're actually washing down the operating suites with superacid water. They're doing the laundry from the operating rooms with superacid and superalkali water. Now, let's say, and there was a bioterrorism conference held in Washington, D.C. in November of last year, sponsored by the government and Johns Hopkins University. Very interesting sponsorship. But they came up and said that it wasn't a question of whether or not we were going to be exposed to bioterroristic biological organisms. It was just a matter of when. Now, anthrax has been thrown around as possibly one of the organisms, one of the bacteria that would be utilized as a terroristic scenario. They don't have enough vaccine to even treat the military. What makes you think that you're going to be one of those lucky numbers that they're going to have some for you and your family? If you do not take the bull by the horns yourself and have some protection, then you're going to be stoned out of luck. And if you think this is way out, then ask your grandparents about the swine flu epidemic of 1918 and how many millions of individuals died in this country from a flu that maybe we had one sentence said about it in med school. Millions. In the streets of Philadelphia, families put bodies out on the front porch, and wagons came down to collect them because usually by the end of the week, the whole family may be dead. You didn't even know anything about it. So what makes you think you're going to suddenly have the right antibiotic or vaccine to work? You better have something that you take the responsibility yourself to work with to counteract these organisms. Now, what will do it? All of these bioavailable waters. The superacid water from the superacid electrolysis machine will sterilize on contact. One of my favorites, Lechina mira, a little lichen from Russia that has been turned into a soap that I would suggest each of you have some of that in your medicine cabinet. Just a couple of drops. You can wash down surfaces and they'll be protected for months. Just washing it with this soap. Concentration 500 to 1. Now we noticed with the AIDS virus that we could use the superacid water. We noticed we could use the Lechina mira for it and Ebola. What do you think stopped, one of the things that stopped the AIDS epidemic in Rwanda and Zaire several years ago? It was the superacid water from these machines. We went in and we cleaned the camps up. The CDC here in Atlanta knows that because the specimens were sent over here. However, we were prevented just 6 months ago from taking it to Africa to use it for the AIDS virus and for the Ebola. And thus what has continued to happen, and how frustrating it is to us to know that I've got something that is non-toxic and simple that would stop the epidemic, and we were told you will not be allowed to take it there. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. And yes, the studies have been done. Yes, the studies have been done academically in terms of their effectiveness against AIDS, against polio, against strep, flesh-eating strep and staph that are resistant to antibiotics. These waters work against that. You better take note, and you better have something simple that can be used. The deuterium sulfate, just a couple of drops in your water can mean you got clean water to drink. Protection against E. coli, introduced by many means. Now, cells with cancer vibrate at roughly 1,800 angstrom. If a body is loaded with bacteria, that speed of vibration drops to approximately 1,300 angstrom. If cancer is in that body, it's going to drop from 6,500 down to 1,800 angstrom. Okay? So something's there in terms of vibration. Cancer and with the bacteria, virus, or fungi. The U.S. Department of Agriculture actually used the superacid water against spores from a fungus that was eating up all the durum wheat. And of course they laughed at us and said, yeah, you're going to tell us that this little water is going to stop this when nothing else in the world has worked. They stopped laughing when their experiment showed that it stopped the spores of the fungus. You have cryptococcus here. Those little spores are getting into many brains out here. And I was in Macon a couple weeks ago and found out that cryptosporidium was in the water around Atlanta and Macon, Georgia, in their public water system. What you going to use? Simple, non-expensive. Take the bull by the horns yourself and protect your family. Now, what else is important as we begin to wind down here? This is an equation called the equation of life, which was discovered by rediscovered by Dr. Carey Reams shortly after the turn of the century. The importance of this is multifold, but what I'm going to zero in on is the following. In 1995, we lost 141 young athletes under the age of 21 years to heart disease, not diagnosed until after death. Meaning they had been through some of the tests. They had been through some of the blood tests, stress tests. They couldn't find anything. During that time, or during that period, I had the occasion to have several young athletes come into the office. and they were having chest symptoms. But again, everything was coming up negative. We did this little test using urine and saliva. And in this test, what I found was the salts. If you look on here and note that the salt should be 6.5, their salts were 30 and above. They shouldn't be higher than 7. When you hit 20, I start raising the red flag. The salts were high. When I looked over there at the nitrates and the ammonia, which should be 3 and 3, they were up at 10 and 12 each. Now, what is that? The nitrates gauge how you break down flesh protein. The ammonia gauges how you break down vegetable and fruit protein. If you can think of ammonia as a very pungent gas, you put it up to your nose so it makes you squint a little bit there, okay? If you've got ammonia in your system, in your body, and it's a gas, gases rise to the top. What's at the top of your system? Your brain. So it's going to irritate your nervous system, okay? Now, if I can't break down my protein, then I can't make hormones. If I can't break down my protein, then I also cannot make enzymes. If I can't break down my protein, I can't make the amino acids that will allow me to have new DNA. And thus, I can't make new cells to replace old ones. Now, why is that? Because my pH was off. How acid is my system? 95% of persons in North America are too acid, meaning that their urine pH is below 6.4. The significance of that is multifold, but to show you here, for all of you taking all the minerals and vitamins and things that you're taking, if you're too acid, you can't absorb them. 95% of America is too acid. They can't absorb any of these minerals and vitamins. So you got the richest urine in the East. It's all going down the commode, okay? I have to be at least 5.8 in order to absorb calcium. So we got a problem there. 2% of the population in my testing is alkaline. Guess who they are, folks? Those fast-moving brains. Those little geniuses. The little kids and my dyslexics and my attention deficit disorder folks, so-called disorder folks. They're geniuses. We tend to lose our geniuses young because their brains are processing so fast, their body has a hard time keeping up with their brain. So like blow a fuse. Now remember we saw the sugar, alcohol side, heroin side of there? All that's trying to do is slow their brain down so they can focus. But there's an old thing, if you don't use me, you lose me. So they act like serotonin and melatonin. And so it shuts off that pineal gland. But all they're trying to do is slow the brain down. They know they're not dumb. And they're all alkaline. At least the predominance of them are. Some have shifted acid because it's been going on so long. I'm going to take 2 seconds to also say to you about that acid. If you are acid, what do you say when you're angry? I'm pissed. Okay? How often do you say that? I'm pissed. Well, what's that going to do to your bladder? But respond. She's pissed. I guess I need a little irritation. Okay? When you're holding on to your stuff, whether it was Uncle John or Aunt Sue that did something to you 40 years ago, and you've decided that it's to your advantage to still hold on to that stuff. Well, when I measure your urine, and you got a pH around 5.3 and you're off the chart, and you're not able to absorb anything, then you're beginning to rust inside. You're beginning to decay. And you can hold on to it if you want, but I'm going to tell you, cancer is going to creep into that system. It's just as simple as that. I won't go into more detail on this chart, but there's a lot more there. Okay, back to the kids with the cardiovascular disease. In fact, in the traditional side, they're beginning to look at nitrates and say, there's some connection here with nitrates and hypertension and cardiovascular disease. I can spend $3,000 running tests or just do a little urine and saliva for less than $100 and get all the answers. Because what we find is it tells me 6 to 9 months ahead of time before it shows up in the blood, which is late, that there's problems with handling, or there's a deposit of salts around the heart or in the blood vessels and causing them to become like stovepipes, and in the bowel so that it cannot do its normal job. Remember, its job is to say how much water needs to go up to the brain. So what do I have to do? Simply drink one of the bioavailable waters. It'll pull excess salt and sugar out of the system simply by drinking the water. Again, when I use the red water, I find out that diabetics, 45 to 60 days after beginning drinking one 16-ounce bottle a day, need half the insulin that they needed. In some cases, don't need it at all, just by drinking water. Amazing stuff to me, but seems rather inexpensive and a more accurate way to do some of the things that we're doing. They're already doing it in the German hospitals as a preliminary screen before anybody's admitting. Now, what else is important about that pH? And what have we found? Well, this is a discovery that took place now about almost 4 years ago. And this is a result of people talking to each other in science. That's very hard, because everybody's out there trying to get a Nobel Prize. So the biophysicists don't talk to the chemists, who don't talk to the physicians, who don't talk to the nuclear entities, okay? And we just got them to talk to each other. And I was in one of those think tanks where people were talking to each other. And we found out that the biophysicists knew this years ago, but had no application for it. You see this little cloud there off the side of the cell, of the interior of the cell, called a rosetta? That's what they discovered. And they found that this rosetta was the portal to getting in things into the cell. And if that were present, unobstructed, that you could get all the nutrients that cell needed to allow it to operate. See the little kite up there with a string? The Ca there represents calcium. And it is what wants to go through that portal into the interior of the cell, bringing with it enzymes and your vitamins. Very, very, very important. And if you were the last person on the earth that says there's only 10 minerals up there, but I'm only going to allow you to pick one, pick calcium. Your brain needs it, your thyroid needs it, your heart needs it, your muscles need it, your teeth need it, your nerves need it, your bones need it. And remember, the body's going to do everything it can to keep that brain going. Water and calcium. Now, this is a healthy cell. Notice the pH, roughly 6.4 to 6.8 in the interior for things to happen the way they should. In comparison to this cell has a membrane around that rosetta. That kite can't get in. The portal was closed. And this is what a cancer cell looks like. Development of a membrane around the rosetta so that no longer can nutrients get into the cell. What happened? The pH dropped. Remember, you were angry, in fear, guilty, or had anxiety, all of which caused that pH to drop. Is it worth it, folks? Is it worth holding on to it? The cell actually begins to eat itself up when this happens. Very important traditional medicine development. That ain't alternative. That's straight up medicine. Because I don't know what the traditional and the non-traditional is anymore. I sort of think they're reversed. Hopkins, a couple years ago, stress releases adrenaline, the death hormone. The more adrenaline you're going to release, just be guaranteed that you're going to have trouble with cancer. Now, Hopkins again, a couple years ago, said black folks had more adrenaline release than all the other people in the world. Is it worth it, folks? It's taking you away from here. It can alter your DNA. All right, what other discoveries do we have? What's going on? Again, Nobel Prize awarded in physiology for discovery of brain chemicals stimulated by emotions. This is traditional medicine. You're finding out how you think, how your emotions are creating chemicals that are causing disease in the body. And actually, how you think is really affecting your DNA. You can actually change your DNA. Change your DNA, well, what does that mean? That means if I so-called had an inherited disease, I'm not stuck with it. People and families think the same way. They do things the same way. They're passed on in generations. That's what heredity is. Because now I know I can change my DNA by simply changing my thoughts. One more for you. We learned that at the time of conception, the thoughts of the parents are transferred to that egg, to that developing fetus at the moment of conception. And the personality is whatever the thought pattern was of the father at the moment of conception. So who do you look like? You look like your mom? Or do you look like Dad's affair down the street? Where was his mind at the time of conception? Not to pick on men, okay? But it's how it is. It's where it is. This is another thing for you to know about. This is all stuff coming out left and right. In a child, we have what we call in all people we have neuroplasticity, a term you're going to begin to see again in science and other areas. What does that mean? That means that my neurons, my brain cells are so flexible that I easily make connections. In children, that's easy. They just hook up to another brain cell and keep going. In adults, they're just searching everywhere, trying to make those connections. Or they're hardwired to the same connection and won't change. And I already told you, you could change those. But you have to be willing to do that. So that's called neuroplasticity. Again, okay, for the diehards in the audience that say, I don't believe any of this. Well, guess what? Red wine. Nobel Prize again, discovering in red wine that it increases that neuroplasticity. Let's go religiously now. We have communion, we drink red wine. These are old things rediscovered. There is more antioxidant, 700 to 1, than the next closest thing in terms of antioxidant amount to a glass of red wine. It is the fermented grape, skin, seed, and stem together that causes that. Measured. This is traditional medicine. You don't have to go alternative. And what they found, it was resveratrol was the magic scenario, the chemical that they discovered was in red wine. Notice also its impact on cellular motion, in terms of DNA connections, decreasing cholesterol, especially the bad cholesterol, so-called bad cholesterol, the LDLs, and acting as a free radical scavenger, gathering up again all those free reigning oxygens that would cause your body to decay or rust or create cancer. Just a glass of red wine a day. Now, with water, as we get to the closing part here, what I say, and remember your body's supposed to be 85% water, your brain wants to be at least 90% water. Well, what if I just said in a room, I didn't have to do anything else, but in the same room as some water that I was looking under that microscope with, you're a devil. This one here shows what that nice, beautiful crystal turns into. Looks terrible. You can't even find a crystalline structure in there. But if I simply say, you're an angel, notice the crystals that form. I just said it in the same room. I'm going to kill you. This is what that nice crystal water molecule begins to look like. If you look real close to me, I can even see a little man in there. And all that was said in the room was, I'm going to kill you. So if you don't think the impact of what you say has an impact on the body in terms of disease, especially if you're loaded with water and how it's going to respond, here's evidence of that. And this one, just to remind you what the water molecule should look like, says, I thank you in water language. And I do. Thank you. Sure if this is question and answer time or we've finished, okay? I'll either come down for questions or I'll either come down for questions. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Does anybody have any questions that I might be able to approach? I won't guarantee they'll have all the answers, but try to head you in the right direction to get them if I don't have them. I'm not sure how they're going to do this so that you can be heard. Mike? Okay, this young lady here, so at least I think I can hear her to replicate her question if you can't hear it in the back.
Wine will the same effect have against the heat grapes?
No, remember I said it is the fermented grape skin, seed, stem that actually where the studies were done. Oh, sorry. I was asked, would eating grapes do the same thing as drinking a glass of wine? No, is the answer. Yes. Is the wine different now than it used to be when they used grapes and chemicals were not in it? The main thing that is in the wine now, of course, are the sulfites. And in a number of the cheap wines, they're nothing but chemicals. What I suggest you do, even if you're living here in Philadelphia, is to get a bucket and start growing your own grapes and make your own wine. The comparison is so different from what one can buy in the store. It's just tremendous. So I would encourage you, number one, to grow your own food, period. It's one of the reasons I live where I do, because even though I'm as busy as I am, others do it for me or with me just because of my timing, but that's what I recommend. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, this is a sample of one of the machines that just hooks up to your tap. How are you going to get it there? I mean, we're working on it. Don't think it's something simple. You get my point. Don't think that that's going to stop us, or that it has stopped us. But through official channels, it has been very difficult to get it in. The red water is readily available to everyone. Mike is going to have it available here in the Philadelphia area. We have used it as a humanitarian water, mainly first to help individuals with cancer with metastasis. Now, what we have found with the red water is that it tends to go to the metastasis first, and then goes to the primary. It has been especially good in melanoma and in head and neck tumors, which on the traditional side of medicine, we have almost nothing that works. Head individual, 74 years of age, had already had chemo and radiation, was essentially sent to the hospital to die. And we put her on one 16-ounce bottle of the red water a day. And at 2 weeks, she had gone through stage 4 melanoma. At 2 weeks, had gone into full remission. And at 6 weeks, there was no sign of melanoma in her system, and that's dramatic. We also had had a little boy with osteosarcoma with metastasis to the lungs, already scheduled for a biopsy at the Cleveland Clinic, and we found that when they went in, after him drinking for 1 week, 1 bottle a day, he was 11 years old, that when they went in, the tumor had totally disintegrated. And of course, his oncologist called me and said, his mother says he's been drinking something. And of course, he didn't want to believe that this was simply water. And what I didn't say is it's in the physics of the water. For all these years, we've been looking only at the chemistry. Now we've begun to look at the physics of the water. And you're going to see so much beautiful work coming out over the next couple of years involving these. All of the physics of all the waters that I mentioned are all very special. And they do have healing properties back to the body. Now, I have somewhat limited my discussion, as I said at the beginning, to those that I know will stand up under academic scrutiny. Because again, we got the same animals out there in the United States. We act like a good housekeeping clearing source for a number of things that people think will work. I can't think when it comes to people's lives. I got to know. So any of the things that we're mentioning, there is good academic proof that these things do work. Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Again, it's going, yes, it's capital L-E, capital C-H-E-N-Y-A, Mira, capital M-E-E-R-A. And that stands for Milk of the Universe. It's a simple lichen. It comes in from Russia. And very newly, that has been made into a base for some antibiotics. So we got some good news coming there, but all you need is the soap. And Michael, again, is going to be the hub for coming into Philadelphia, and hopefully many of you will also have an interest in terms of getting it out there. I just call it the new Underground Railroad, folks. It's just the soap, okay? Yes. Everlasting Life Center has it. And if you have difficulty, Michael can tell you, again, the sources how to reach there. Very easy, very simple, non-toxic. Won't hurt anything unless it's a toxin. Yes, sir.
Someone wanted to look into the type of study that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you go about what university, college,
The gentleman asked if we wanted to look into some of the academic studies of what we're in. This is really a whole new emerging world of water. I would like to see young people, and we encourage young people to get into this new world, as well as some that have retired, to say, you're not dead and you shouldn't be dying anytime soon. Let's help give something back to your body and give something that is worthwhile that you can give back to the community, okay? We're acting like a clearinghouse, per se, of information, and are attempting to get into even broader circles to get it out. We need the help of everybody. We are the only woman, the only black in the world right now dealing with these waters, and it's been very difficult to be the only banner. I don't choose to be the only banner. So whatever we can parlay with you just this afternoon has been a parlayance for you, and that you have had open minds enough to listen. What you do with it is up to you. We will see Again, Mike is acting here as one hub in terms of information. He can't handle it all. In terms of getting the information, making available to folks what they need to make it happen. You can't wait around for the government to protect you. Your water is much worse than you even have a clue that it is. When you have something simple that can convert your water into drinkable, safe water that tastes good, plus all the attributes that I've talked about, then you've really got something. Yes, ma'am.
I'm from Lincoln University.
Yes.
I'm very interested in getting these mountains deep, and there's no information to tell me how I can get in touch with you again,
Sure.
or what books you've written, ways that I can continue dialogue.
Sure.
Share that.
Okay, two things. I do have a video. I have been so busy. I have not slowed down enough to get my books finished. Hopefully by the end of this year, we will have the books on water finished. But there is a video for most, it's going to be a video of the proceedings today, and that will be available. My email address is drmona, D-R-M-O-N-A, at The Country Doctors, all lowercase, doctors spelled out, doctors.com. And we will try to get back to you, as quickly as possible, whatever your questions are. And that's the easiest way. Dr. Mona, Dr. Mona, all lowercase, at thecountrydoctors.com. That's probably the best way right now to do it. And we'll try to get out articles as needed. I mean, the abstracts, the information is stacked about this high. So we try to be a bit focused in terms of what you want information on, so we can get that to you. We have two more questions, they tell us. I see 3 hands, so if they'll indulge me, we'll do 3, the 3 people here. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Mhm. I'd recommend the waters. You'll immediately see a difference in them. It's like it calms, they're like, yes, manna from heaven. It's the jet fuel they need for the jet engines to keep up with them. She asked about the little children in the water. What I did not also, just because of time, go into is the impact of the water on babies. We're noticing that the umbilical cords are like steel when you attempt to cut them. The obstetricians all know babies that have been on the electrolyzed waters, excuse me, and the clustered longevity waters, because they can't cut their umbilical cord. We're finding that IQs are being enhanced by simply being on the waters. More studies need to be done, more verification. This is a whole field for papers galore, and I encourage people to do it. You might as well take the lead. The Russians are approximately, the rest of the world, the rest of the scientific world is approximately 10 years in front of us when it comes to water science. I presented a paper in Japan in 1997. I was one of 4 American scientists to present. There were 2,000 scientists at that convention. Okay? 4 from the United States. I was somewhat embarrassed, even though we were up with them. I was somewhat embarrassed that there were only 4 of us. And in fact, in that group of 4, one of the gentlemen gave me a rough time about the paper I presented about the athletes, only to return and have his 41-year-old son, who was a runner, die from exactly what I had presented in the paper. He stopped laughing. What I wanted to say with that was the high-protein drinks that individuals are using for weight loss and for muscle building, if your body is too acid, you cannot break it down. And it is depositing as mineral salts around the heart and causing a problem. So that's what we're finding in cardiovascular disease. And drinking the waters it chelates, which tends to pull these salts out of the system and lower that salt level, as well as raise the pH of the body. All of these waters will bring the pH up. Okay? I think this young lady here with the turban and this young, yes ma'am? You had a question? All right. This young lady here. Mhm. Okay. 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 Okay, a couple questions in one there, okay? Um, what water will be the best, simple, and inexpensive to which come? Let's deal with your second one first. Hypothyroidism, her thyroid has slowed down. Why and what's going on? Couple things to be remembered. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It can either be transferred into some other form, whatever. Thyroid is the fifth seal on that spiny thing in terms of the endocrine system or the seals. If energy is coursing up the spinal cord and all of a sudden you don't say what you really would like to say, you're holding back, that energy has to go somewhere. So you're either going to blow your thyroid or you're going to blow a disc in the back of your neck. But the energy has to go somewhere. It just burns out from these energy perspectives. So that often we find hypothyroidism, there's a connect. Calcium is very important for your thyroid. It means you're not absorbing it. Again, why aren't you speaking? Are you holding back something? Get the pH up. You need calcium. You need water. Okay, so those are things to keep in mind. Person talking to me about thyroid problems, and again, traditionally, somewhat difficult area to treat. Magnesium, the balance to the calcium appropriately was off. Simply getting magnesium balance in terms of what they were taking in, and the parathyroid started acting normally again. Inexpensive ways to look at what should I take. Inexpense is where we put it. If I'm talking about an $800, $900 unit, and I look at how long would it take me to save $900? If I have a family member who is ill, and they're about to die, then can't the family get together and each put in $100, put the machine at that person's house, and then you come over and fill your bottles and take it home? One thing. Simply, it's just where you value what you're paying for, okay? There are straws that at least clean the water. And you say with that, Doc, I only got $5, I got 5 kids, and I want them to drink clean water. Get a $9 straw, the special straws, and have them share and save your money. You never let anything stop you, and the last thing you want to let stop you is money. It becomes a slave chain, biggest slave chain you could ever have. You're being stuck in economics. And I'm a realist. I know how hard you work for your money. That's another whole topic, another whole lecture for us. Okay? The drops that I talked about, the deuterium plus, hydroxygen plus, will at least sterilize your water. I didn't go into an expanded thing about how else they work on the body. But again, they will help to decrease tumor formation as well as sterilization. If you're traveling, what are you going to use? Take the drops. Add it to your water. Not all drops are alike. So know what you have. That's deuterium sulfate drops. That's hydroxygen plus in the commercial name. If you talk about the red water in a bottle a day, your medications are costing, if I look at mental health medication, just a patient was in, they're charging $400 a month for one pill a day. your antihypertensive meds. You begin to compare pricing, and what are you really paying? To end it, to enhance what you're taking traditionally, so you only need half or a third of what you're taking, if you need it at all, and allowing those cells to repair themselves. So again, it's all relative. It's how you look at things in terms of what worth and what does it cost. Okay, they told me I got to end. Thank you so very much for your time.